Hello and welcome everyone. My name is Yvonne Villarreal and I cover television here at the Los Angeles Times. Thanks so much for joining us for our Showrunners panel. Thanks for being here, guys.
Thanks for having us.
Thank you.
This is the weirdest strike captains meeting but okay.
Had you guys met each other before, any of you?
No.
All first time?
Met
We
in
met,
passing.
yeah.
We met in passing. We met before.
Mm-hmm. Well, let's make it a lively conversation. I'm always curious, like, what do you remember about your first time being in a writer's room? Starting out, what do you remember about that?
I was terrified.
Yeah, I was terrified.
Yeah.
Why?
It's like the fun.
I
'cause
talked
they're-
way too much.
Did you get fired?
I got fired from every job I ever had till I was running a show. Yeah.
What was your first writer's room?
A show called Higher Ground, which was on Fox Family a long time ago. Hayden Christensen was in it.
Oh, wow.
Wow.
It was his first job, but then it was ER after that. That's where I really screwed things up.
What was your favorite writer's room you were in?
The ones I've run.
Yeah.
Much better, yeah, because
What did you change that they did?
couches, not tables.
Couches, not table.
Yeah, table kills you.
Table. Yeah, that seems like.
Once you go couches, you can never go back.
Yeah, Master Done. We always just, and I've heard of other people doing this too, where we just kind of rent a house or something, so it feels like a little more.
Oh,
homey.
that's a cool idea.
Yeah, I
Do you
thought.
sit on couches in the house?
Yeah, and then the second
Like a
season,
writer's room in the-
second season we wrote in New York, and we would often like just go on walks and stuff, and people would go get ice cream and come back with a scene. My
like
brother
that.
came back once, and he like got all this ice cream on his face. He's like, "You guys didn't go on a walk. You went and got ice cream." He's like, "But we wrote the scene." And I'm like, "It's funny. All right."
Gloria, what were you saying about being terrified?
Oh, well, it's just, the only woman and a bunch of very smart Harvard guys, because they'll tell you. They don't keep it. They're not shy.
Yeah, what room?
No, quintuplets, which actually did end up having another woman come aboard, but we weren't allowed to sit together. We were told we weren't allowed to sit
Wait,
together.
what?
Yeah.
Why?
I don't know.
Who told you that?
The showrunner.
Really?
Yeah, said it
Damn.
happens, listen, it happens that the women tend to sit next to each other. So we would just text each other all the time.
Wait,
Interesting.
what?
Never
Yeah.
heard
Well,
that.
it's
in my
weird when
life.
you're the
Yeah.
only.
I make our women sit next to me.
You go the other way. No, they were very nice to me, though. I have to say they were nice to me. But it was, it's a lot of older dudes.
Wow. Well, one thing I got from Mike Schur, who ran Parks and Rec, is I remember I never wrote on Parks and Rec, but I would go in, and he had so many different kinds of people, and I think that really helps us on Master of None just to have different opinions, and
Yeah, what goes into assembling your room?
I think we just try to get a bunch of different voices. Like my brother's very young, Well, we try to have a good ratio of men and women. We try to have, different.
How many people do you have on your staff?
This season we had a little more. We had, around like 5, 6. Sometimes people weren't there. Sometimes we'd have some extra people. But we really tried to get a kind of I hate the word diverse now, but we try to get a diverse group. But, it's interesting. There's one day when we were doing Master of None where some people were gone, and it was me, my brother, one of our writers, this woman Lakshmi, who wrote on Brooklyn Nine-Nine, and Alan. And I was like, wow, this is the only writer's room that's never had a white dude in the mix. And we got so much great stuff done that day.
Yeah, I'm sure. Yeah, reinvented the medium.
But that was weird of just like to have, to have 3 Indian people in the room. It was really.
And are you guys? I'm sorry. No, finish.
Oh, it was something that I never thought I would be in a room like that, But it was cool because I remember I saw some interview, one of these kind of things with what's his name, the guy that runs Empire. I don't know why his name.
Lee Daniels?
Lee Daniels. Yeah. He was talking about like, he has an all black writer's room, and he goes in, and I know the feeling you're describing, kind of just being the only person that kind of looks like and that's why that movie. I haven't seen that movie Get Out, but I've been gone. I haven't had a chance. I've heard it's great, but you see that trailer, you're like, I know what that's like. Yeah. You're always, whenever you're in a room full of white people, you're scared they're gonna kill you.
Or make you clean something if you're the Latina. Like, I will, because I like things to be clean. So it kind of works both ways.
Peter, what went into assembling the room for Better Call Saul?
Well, we're very lucky because there's a core group that's been working together for a long time, and it's we do a lot of promoting from within. Actually, we've had a lot of success having writer's assistants. In fact, and now 3 of our writers started out as writer's assistants. So it's half the room at this point, and it's just, it's like I'm not a musician, but I guess it's like playing in a band, where you have there are things that you kind of know each other, and you know the characters and the story. But then on the other hand, we like to bring new people in too, because it can get to be like a sequestered jury where you just know each other's quirks. And everybody certainly knows my quirks. So we like to bring in some new folks, which we've done, and it's different every year. I think that's the thing that's funny about it, is no matter, even though you have some of the same people change over the years, and we've been working together for 10 years, and so there's a writer Jenny Hutchison, who started out as writer's assistant. I remember her. She was so quiet. When she was writer's assistant, she was very quiet. She'd take notes, and she'd be very quiet. And now, you just can't stop her. She's pushing the story forward. She's great.
Where is she allowed to sit?
Anywhere she wants. Anywhere she wants.
Yes!
Absolutely.
I disagree with that, but fine.
Yes.
Yeah.
Do you find that everybody sits in the same seat all the time?
Yes.
Because I move around all the time. Did you have that growing up? Was there a seat at the dinner table where everybody sat at the same seat?
We have one very, very tall writer named Ian Maxstone Graham, who, if you've ever seen the Simpsons episode with the 22 stories about Springfield, the very tall man, that is modeled on him. And he's so tall that whenever he sits in a seat, he adjusts it sort of way lower, but that's so he can kind of go back and stretch out his very long legs, very sort of Kareem Abdul-Jabbar kind of game of death. And then what happens is he gets up, and the day is over, and then we come back, and then it's sort of like this bad musical chairs game of someone sitting down and going, nah, I'm in the Ian chair. And so no one ever really wants the Ian chair, but everyone's always moving around.
Well, and what surprised you about being the boss and the types of tasks that are now your responsibility, or the things you need to do to run a show?
You get to do a lot. It's really fun. I love it. I really love it. This is my first time running a show, and I'm co-running it with Mike Royce, who's wonderful, enlisted in Everybody Loves Raymond, and so he's been a real guide to me, and Norman Lear obviously have been real guides to me in showing me the ropes, and our room is half Latino, which is also like, what? How are we here? I mean, it just blows our minds. Because there's such a Latin component to the show, and I didn't want to be the only one in the room for this specific one. So that they allowed that they not only said that was cool, but supported it, like, kind of blew my mind. And so just getting to make those sorts of hiring decisions, and what things look like on our sets, and I mean, it's everything.
How about you, Bruce? The first time you ran a show,
You have to finish the sentence.
like what were you surprised by that was now your responsibility?
It's interesting. I think it's like a lot of things that you're a writer, and the skills that you need to be a showrunner aren't at all the skills that you need to become a showrunner. So it's like, when you're a computer programmer and you're a computer programmer, and then they say, okay, now you're managing a bunch of computer programmers.
That's very LA based, though, I will simply say. I was lucky enough, my real first full-time job, I did a little thing at Comedy Central, but my first-time job was Saturday Night Live. And the one advantage of Saturday Night Live that I look back on, and you're sort of there and you're miserable, as is everybody, and then you leave and it was wonderful. But you're kind of very much from day one, you are the mini producer and almost director of your sketches. And so I did 3 years of Friday night, 4 a.m., when they were still doing tape to tape editing, like calling edits and learning how to edit. And your sketch was picked and your first job was go talk to the set decorators, and the second job was go talk to costume, and then go talk to music, and all these things where you didn't necessarily think I wasn't like, oh, I'm learning to be a showrunner per se, but when I got out to LA and realized that people sort of were on my level, I guess, that had been only solely in a room, just didn't have some of these, like, I mean, you hate to say normal human skills, but things that I took for granted a little bit. But I also, dare I say, and not to derail everything, I have many problems with rooms in general, and obviously
writers' rooms or just
writers' rooms. I mean, I love
that's a big issue. There's
I want to know, like, what have you done that you found to be effective? For example, like in Master Done Room, I try to like ban people using phones, and we try to like take walks and like keep everybody's energy up. Is there things you do to kind of?
I mean,
foster
mine
a
are
better
more
writer's room?
philosophically from the beginning, which is I love punching up in a room. Obviously, I think I think especially a small group of people certainly, but even if it's a large group of people, I think you can take something and make it better. Yeah. But I despise and refuse to write scenes in a room. I do not do. There is no writing of scenes in my rooms. We do not group write. We do not. And this is stuff that I guess was sort of imparted on me by Larry David that's where I basically learned to write sitcoms, sort of by him, both in terms of the importance of the outline and structure and what you're trying to do, but more importantly than that, that the writer pitches the stories for his episode and then goes off and writes his episode. And then maybe, then the showrunner, in that case Larry and Jerry, take the show and perhaps do things, but it is your episode as opposed to, and again, I'm talking more specifically about comedy rooms, and I think it is a little different in drama world, and I know that. But a lot of comedy shows, and this is, I guess, what I have my issue with. We're all sitting in the room, and you pitch out all these wonderful stories, but it's your turn to write the episode. So the writer's assistant sort of types all this stuff up, and you go off and don't really have any responsibility, either however you want to talk about it, ethically or even just comedy-wise responsibility, but it's your turn to write it up, and now you're writing it up. And I also do think a lot of times in rooms, especially when you're trying to write stuff, again, different than punching up, I think there's a lot of like things that get, and again, I'm talking comedy, things that masquerade as jokes in rooms that just sort of just are terrible. I mean, I don't know what else to say. Yeah. So I have those issues beyond, I love taking a walk and all that kind of stuff, but but I mean, I'm talking just philosophically.
Like we go get ice cream.
Ice cream, all for it. But I'm lucky enough that most of the shows I've ever worked on before I was a showrunner didn't really have the traditional comedy writer's room. So I always talk about my staff more than I talk about my room, just because not a fan.
I do think it's a real cultural difference between comedy and drama, and I'm always interested in people whose shows like yours kind of thread that line anyway, that they're multi-camera, multi-camera or single camera, that kind of thing. Because in our room, we never write in our room. We don't punch up in our room. We don't touch stuff in our room.
What do you guys do in the room then?
Do you have ice cream? Is there ice cream at least?
Why would the drama room be any different? What do you guys do that's so different? I don't understand why that would be so different.
In our case, it's Vince. The way he ran Breaking Bad is very much the way we run Better Call Saul, and it's the individual. It's a little bit like SNL. Once we talk through the story. That's what we do in the writers' room. We talk through the story.
Outline the beats of the episode.
We talk through the story in as much detail as we possibly can.
Excruciating
we
minutiae.
try to figure out.
And do you guys do that thing that I've heard about in drama rooms where like sometimes you're kind of like if you're doing 10, you're sort of thinking of like the first 3, the second 3, and like any of that kind of stuff? No, okay.
No, we try to think about where the story's going, but until it's carded, we use 3x5 cards, and we spend a lot of time writing them and making sure that they look right and that everyone understands what the scene is, because the idea is that everyone in the room participates in the breaking of each episode. But then the individual writer goes off and writes it, and we don't punch up. It's I or Vince or a couple of people will.
Well, that seems like a specific
we'll just try to
we'll
work on the script individually with a writer, but it is that writer's episode. It is that writer's script, and usually that writer goes to, in our case, Albuquerque, and is on the set every single day and is there for some of the prep.
Is that a
And
euphemism for something? Or is it really?
it is a euphemism. Yeah.
Really?
It's Albuquerque, New Mexico. Albuquerque, New Mexico. Hey, don't diss Albuquerque.
I'm not.
It's a
I
great
just-
town.
yeah,
It's a great town. It's maybe
great
almost
town?
Maybe
I don't
almost
know,
as-
man.
Well, I don't know.
Almost as nice as Toronto.
And maybe almost as nice as Toronto. Who knows?
Well, that sounds pretty similar to what we do. That doesn't sound very radical, except for the addition of the punch-up. But in our room, a lot of it, it's just everyone just talking, and myself and Alan kind of eventually make the big decision of, okay, this seems right or whatever. But
Now, do you guys, if one of you isn't there, does the other person run the? I mean, do you have a designated person to run the room? If
we're
you guys-
usually both there. If we leave, my brother runs the room. Yeah.
How about what's the importance? I mean, we were talking about this earlier. The importance of taking a break, like Master of None. It's been a little bit over a year.
Between seasons, the first season came out in November 2015, and this season is May 2017. So whenever we finished, Netflix was like, "All right, so when you guys ready to get back in the room?" I was like, "No."
Yeah.
And it was a little bit of at first they were a little bit resistant, but I was like, "Look, man, I dumped my head into this first season. I need to live life and be a person."
We got to
and
talk
have
about
some
why
stuff.
that's important to experience life so that
Yeah.
you can write.
Yeah, so I told him it was really important to me to do this break, and I think you guys did a similar thing on Curb. Where
Yeah, we were talking a little bit about
Yeah.
that before, which was, you get to the end of a Curb season and it's sort of like, and I'm dating it now because the last Curb season was a couple of years ago already, which was, now it would be your iPhone, but basically your little notebook is empty. You've sort
Yeah.
of used up
And
or
I'm
got
so
rid of-
glad
yeah.
you guys do that, because it's great for me when I'm on the phone calls, be like, "Hey man, look at Curb, look what they do. Got to get that
but
Curb
it
style
was
break."
that thing where you kind of, and by the way, when back in the Seinfeld days, which I remember it happening and going, wow, which was, we all went to New York over Christmas, and it was like, why are we doing this and whatever? But it was sort of like, well, we're kind of together, but we're in New York, and we're on the streets of New York, and we bumped into a guy, and all of a sudden it's like that became a story, and I was just
Yeah.
Was that in the middle of your season?
yeah, sometimes it was the middle. It was the middle of the season of just the
That
idea
I
of
don't know how-
you have to have. I mean, especially. I mean, back in the day on Seinfeld, when people were submitting ideas, that's how we would hire writers. Was just we weren't reading specs as much as let's have some idea pitches. And you'd go through the idea pitches, especially on Seinfeld, and it's true on Curb and whatever. Which is you'd look at these ideas and you go no, and you get to the one on the bottom and you'd be like, this weird argument you had in the electronics store, is that real? That happened to you, right? And the guy would be like, yeah, how did you know? And it's like, these are all
The real
fake,
stuff's
but
always
this
the
is
best.
this is really interesting because this is the real thing. And that's what Seinfeld was. It was in every episode I ever wrote of Seinfeld and then into Curb, it's all stuff that happened to me or someone I knew that I stole,
Yeah.
and then I extrapolated from it the things that then didn't happen to make the episode, but that's where the ideas came from.
But Veep has to be different because there's a
It
journalistic
is,
side.
obviously,
to it.
there's the political side to it, but a lot of the personal stuff can be things that you can pull from those same life experiences and then turn into sort of the political equivalent. But it is a little harder because of that exact reason. And in that case, obviously, we're doing a lot of talking to real DC people and whatever, and trying to find interesting anecdotes that lead to stories. So I'm constantly like, and the New York Post, by the way, is great at it, especially like 4 or 5 pages in, they'll have these little articles. So like there was one a couple of days ago about I think it was a state senator, but he got a new cell phone, but I guess the number had been like a porn star cell phone or something like that. And I'm not saying we're going to do that, but it's like you sort of definitely write that down
Do
and
you guys
circle
spend a
it.
lot
Yeah.
of time doing those interviews every season, or?
Yeah, I mean, because as the story has shifted and whatnot, and we're into new areas, we meet new people. So for example, this year with her out of office, we did a lot of talking to presidents that lost. So we talked a lot to a lot of people that worked for the first
wow.
Bush
That's very cool.
administration,
That's really
because they didn't think they were going to lose to Clinton. So they were shocked, and they had no plans and no jobs, and a lot of them were blamed. And we had Mitt Romney come in and talk to him, and you sort of kind of are like,
Mitt Romney did a few days on Master
what's
of
it
None
like
too.
to lose? I mean,
He loves
I mean,
ice cream.
Yeah, he does like ice cream. That's true. We learned that as well. But so stuff like that, and as the stories have shifted.
You guys were in production on election night, weren't you?
Yeah, it was about the worst night ever.
What
Yeah.
was that like?
Well, ironically, we were shooting Selena overseas in the Republic of Georgia supervising a Democratic election over there, you know, where they like dip their finger in the colors and whatnot. And so we were doing all of these jokes about democracy and how horrible it is and all of this stuff as like every 5 minutes, like the website updated and her numbers just went lower and lower and lower. And we're a pretty happy-go-lucky set, but it was just quiet and dreadful. And scene cut together actually quite well, but nevertheless, it was weird. Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, I think one of the things you said that's really interesting is, you know, in a comedy room, bringing in your own personal stories. In our room, we have the same thing, but the show, The Handmaid's Tale, is the stories that people bring in. You have to have created a safe space over a really long time so people feel comfortable, because a lot of it is a group of women, our room's primarily women, you know, explaining to men how certain very intimate things feel or work that you just wouldn't know any other way. I mean, it's no matter how much you've talked to, how much you've read, how many sisters you have, you just don't know. So I think that's, if you were asking what we're trying to do in the room, what I try to do in the room is make people feel like you can have conversations that go in really personal, deep, dark places, and they can be comfortable talking about
Yeah, we do that on One Day at a Time too, because it's a family story. So obviously a lot is pulled from my relationship with my mother, because we are sort of the new.
What does she think of the show?
She's there every week.
Oh,
Rita
good.
Moreno,
Okay.
like, yes, my parents are at every episode.
Oh,
my
good,
dad's
good.
dead on the show. He's a little upset by that because he's alive in real life.
Yeah.
But no, they love it.
Let
they
that be
love
a lesson
it.
to you.
I know, believe me. I have like a ghost version of him that appears. But no, we have a lot of really personal stuff, and the characters are Cuban because my family's Cuban, and at one point we had to do an episode about the Pedro Pan movement, which is my mother's story, my parents' story of how they came here, and I've never heard that story. So the room was like, "Can we have them come in?" I'm like, "I mean, I'll ask them." And there's also a veteran component to the story, so we've been having a lot of veterans come in and talk
Having
about going to
people come
war.
in is just
It's incredible.
the best. I
And
mean,
it creates,
you know.
it helps create that intimate space because they're being so open with their stories and their personal experiences. I feel like it
Did
allows
you have
the
them in
writers.
as a group, the vets?
No,
or
they
did you
would
have-
come in one by one, so
When
that
I was
they
on
really
ER,
got a hold.
they used to do nurses' night, so they'd bring in like 10 nurses and 20 bottles of wine, and we get stories for the whole season.
Wow.
Great.
Yeah.
That personal touch. So
Yeah.
crying, a lot of crying in the One Day at a Time writers' room.
There's an episode of Master of None. When does this come out? I mean, is before.
Like
this part out, but-
mid-May, like end of May.
Oh, okay. So I just didn't want to spoil something we did in
No,
the season.
please
but
talk about that episode. I was going to ask.
There's
about
an
it.
episode
Yeah.
where I'm not in the episode.
Yeah.
And it's about just 3 different groups of just random New Yorkers. And one group is like these group. There's one story is about like a doorman, and another one is about a cab driver. Another one is about this deaf woman. And we interviewed just so many like doormen and deaf people and stuff. And you just realize like, oh, everyone could have like one of these Master of None type, like their own show, and it'd be filled with so much interesting
We used to
specific
joke
stuff.
that in the Seinfeld Monk's Cafe, in the diner, that basically at every table were 4 people who thought everybody else in the diner were a bunch of fucking idiots. And that they were going on their own adventures, whatever.
Exactly.
And in some weird way, they had their own sitcom, basically.
Yeah.
Well, to that, like, talk about the way you sort of push the limits of what you could do on TV. Like, I mean, we had an episode where it's like there was a whole storyline was silent, basically.
Yeah, you know, so we're in.
Wait, you guys did a thing that's silent?
Well, we do sequences that are without dialogue, and that's one of the things
cool.
that I find so much. I love when we can dispose of dialogue and just do pure filmmaking. I think for a lot of us, this, we're getting to it's like going back to film school, or getting to go to film school and get to experiment with the medium and how we can tell a story. And we have some characters like Mike, played by Jonathan Banks, who doesn't say a lot. He doesn't say a lot, and when he does talk, he's not telling you what he's thinking. And I think we're just fascinated. I think I'm fascinated by the idea that when people are talking, the real story's happening underneath the dialogue or in parallel with the dialogue. A lot of our characters find it very hard to speak their minds, and it's so interesting to try to look and try to find a way use use the medium to get under their skin. And so we have, and then there's some sequences. We actually have an episode this season which probably has more dialogue than we've ever done before. So we went in the other direction too. This is a show where our premise initially was that this is a lawyer who does not want to go into court. That he's almost like he's scared of actually going into the courtroom. And so part of that was because Vince and I really felt like the lawyer thing's been done a lot. Doctors, lawyers, it's been done a lot. How are we going to do better than all the great law shows that are out there? And so we were intimidated because neither one of us, there's no lawyers in the writer's room. You guys are bringing in people to talk about their personal experience. We're bringing in lawyers to talk about what public defender work is like.
I like our better.
Yeah, it's a different. Well, but the thing is, I think the truth is that if you look at anything enough, you find sides to it that people haven't seen before, and that are kind of unique. And we actually spent a day right across the street there in the courthouse. And one of the things that we realized is the courtroom is a really funny place. It's very dull. It's very formal, and there's all kinds of things to do there that you don't see usually in courtroom scenes. And so we actually have an episode coming up mid-season which has more dialogue than any episode that we've ever done. We finally did a courtroom episode, and it was very scary for all of us because we liked doing the things without the dialogue, and our cast they flipped through the script, which we got to them early because there was so much. It was like putting on a play, and I don't want to give anything away because it's a few weeks out, but it was extraordinary to see how they rehearsed it ahead of time and how they worked on the material, and it was fun to go the other way. So at the beginning of this, and then later on, anyway, it's the great thing is we get to play with the medium to me, and to try to find different ways to get into the heads of these characters.
Because there's this debate about calling television cinematic and saying things are 10-hour movies or 6-hour movies, that we're sort of denigrating the medium. But I don't know, what are your thoughts on this debate? Do you see any problem with it, or?
I just don't know what cinematic really means, as compared to TV. I mean, it's like you don't want to shoot something on TV that would look good in a movie theater and looks bad on TV. And we're shooting things. I mean, I don't know about you guys, but every time I ask, okay, are we shooting for a phone or a 40-inch television? They say yes. So, are you shooting something where you're really up close to people, or are you kind of painting these big, nice tableaus? There's no way to know anymore what people are going to be watching on. But, I think if cinematic means not like TV, it's probably an insult, but I don't take it that way. I mean,
Well, I feel like it's two different questions, because cinematic to me means it's visually interesting. And so I'm doing a multi-camera sitcom. It's 4 cameras. Maybe we're going to start on a coffee cup, but you're going to be on those people. You're going to be on the character. Yeah. So I think what was interesting is just hearing how people people know the tropes. Mm-hmm. So because we have such sophisticated audiences, we have to try to fight that. So I've grown up on a million sitcoms that I loved. And so but kind of now sitcoms have a bad rap, I feel like. So it's how do you make a sitcom and make it something that doesn't feel like it's bad, but it's good. And the beauty of Netflix is we have time. So, our episodes are 28 minutes, 26 to 28 minutes, some are 30. That time gives us more meaty Norman Lear moments because we have the time to get into those characters and still have all the funny stuff that feels familiar, but then give a little broccoli with the meal. And so it is looking at that in that way, because we're just filming a play. Right. And these actors are getting the material and then shooting it a week later in front of a live audience. It's this throwback, and yet it's so new for these actors who are so used to kind of looking at the lines right before shooting the scene and then having time in the makeup trailer to learn their lines for the next scene. It's a new muscle to see them exercise.
I mean, we were talking about it before, that kids, my daughter who's 12, consumes so much narrative, so much more than I ever did as a kid, that the level of she can predict everything that's going to happen in a narrative just from the music cue, from anything. And so, and do you double it up and do exactly what you were, they think you're not going to do, and you play all those expectation games. And on Handmaids, we just decide, okay, what would really happen, and don't go beyond that, because surprising people, pulling a surprise out at the end is not really the point. It's not whether you guess what's going to happen; it's how it happens.
I love what you say, because there's a problem with twists.
Yeah.
With hiding things from the audience.
Yeah.
And it's a great delight for a moment, and this is where the movie versus television thing comes, because The Usual Suspects, how great is that there's this great twist at the end? But if you have The Usual Suspects every week, and sorry, did I ruin it for you?
Yeah, that's okay.
I'm sorry. It's a great thing to have a twist, but if you have a twist every week, then when you're watching, at least for me,
twist isn't a
all
twist.
you're doing is saying, look, what's the twist going to be?
No,
What's the twist?
Twist for twist's sake, I think certainly can get exhausting. But at the same time, and especially in comedy, I personally think, because there is such a long tradition of comedy, and there are these sort of lines that have just become like bad cliches unto themselves, that I'm shocked when I see shows still using them, and that's their choice. But when I see a comedy, what I respond to is when, and I'm not saying everybody watches like this, but when the joke makes me laugh, but also the joke is surprising unto itself, which is very different than a twist per se, but just sort of like, oh wow, like that's really enjoyable. And in terms of story, when a story, again, doesn't have to be a twist, but certainly just goes in the direction, hopefully because that's as you say, that's part of the internal truth of it, but goes in a way where it is something I haven't seen, not necessarily that I'm throwing away 5 years of the show to whatever, which I think falls more into twist, but is still surprising. So I think there's a difference in those thoughts.
I love what you're saying, because the thing that I'm looking for, that what I'm hoping for in the writer's room, more than anything, is that the characters are going to surprise us.
Yeah.
That the characters are going to do things that we didn't expect, that we still believe, that we go deeply
to
enough.
The character,
and we go deeply,
but
surprising yet
it's new. Yeah.
And that was, for me, that was the great reward of the way Michael McKean's character were developed on Better Call Saul, because when we started the show, we thought, well, he's kind of, really, to be honest with you, he started as just a way to humanize this character, to have somebody who was sort of, he had to take care of, who was sort of a boat anchor for him. And then Michael came in, and I remember, because I wrote the first scene that introduced the character, and he played it differently from what I was expecting. He had a pride, and he was imposing in a way that I was not expecting.
Isn't that one of the great things about TV, though? That,
yes.
It's like you're painting the race car during the race.
Yes.
So you see what someone does, and you go, oh, I thought that was going to be funny, and it isn't funny, or those two people have no chemistry. I mean, you were saying you write all the episodes before, but then you rewrite the whole way through.
Yeah, and we write a lot to the actors, and I spend a lot of time rehearsing with them, and we change a lot of things as we're going. Yeah.
What kind of rehearsals do you do? Rehearsal?
Well, it's kind of, I don't know if that's, I call it rehearsals, but I in the first season I would do this, I really liked the dialogue in the Before Sunrise, Before Sunset, those films. And I read once that what Linklater would do is he would have the characters improvise and record it. And I read Kubrick did something like that too, where he would have actors just kind of improvise and then use those recordings to help craft the script. And so I would basically kind of do that kind of process. So if there's a scene where, okay, me and this character are having sex and the condom breaks, I would have the actress and we would be like, all right, so the condom breaks, let's just treat this very real, let's not go for any jokes, let's just treat this very naturally. And we would just improvise a scene, 5-6 times, and then I'd have all those recordings, and then I'd kind of be like, okay, well, this moment's good, this direction feels good, or all right, let's try one where you're not worried about it at all, but I'm worried about it. Okay, let's try one, or I'm worried and you're, try different versions and use that to kind of help make the dialogue feel more natural. So that's technically what I call rehearsals. I don't know if it's really rehearsals.
We do that. We do that with a lot of our bigger scenes. It's kind of something that was started before me. It was came out of Armando Iannucci created the show and ran the first 4 years of it, And that was something that they did a lot in Baltimore. I think a lot of times too, sometimes they were doing it because scripts weren't ready also, which I think they would admit to.
Yeah.
But it's something that sort of the cast was very used to. It's not something I had done a lot of on anything that I had really worked on, but kind of have taken to it, within reason. I think, sometimes, endless improv can be infuriating, obviously.
Oh,
yeah,
I mean,
exactly.
I don't literally.
Yeah.
The improv where it's like
Right.
someone just saying goofy shit,
Right.
like that's not what we're doing.
Right. No,
It's more
you
just trying
sort
to
of
be
want
very
to kind of
natural
go, this
and
is
get.
the set, this is the setting, this is the point, as opposed to the anything can happen. But we'll often do our table read and then and then kind of let everybody go except a couple of people, and kind of in a perfect world we have the sets. It's one of our main sets. But if it's not, we'll kind of fake it in an office. And some of it's just to sort of be thinking about a little bit just the physicality of the blocking, like what are we looking for. But also it will be sort of like, okay, let's just read it. We're holding scripts, we're reading it, we're doing that a couple of times. Now let's just throw those scripts away and whatever, and sort of see where it goes. And really good stuff has come out of that. And also just again, that's sort of like, well, what would happen? And so there were big scenes last season where like we had a big show, which was the Congressional Ball, where she finds out that Tom James, who played by Hugh Laurie, has sort of been secretly plotting against her, but at the same time they're dancing basically. And so just letting sort of, Julia Louis-Dreyfus and Hugh Laurie just sort of play with something, you sort of just almost want to sit back and watch it and just make sure somebody's writing down all the notes. But also, to go like, no, what if you're not angry? What if you're cooler there? And be able to sort of play with it that way, and good stuff comes out of that, definitely. Yeah.
And so do you do that in rehearsal, or do you
I
do
guess
that?
I call it the rehearsal, basically. Yeah, absolutely. And new ideas have come, completely new. Most of the time it's, in a perfect world, it's making something better, sort of, it existed, like it's like an off-the-rack, like, suit or dress or something that you're then kind of really
Tailoring.
going like that. But there have been times, last year we had sort of a scene where it was Tim as Jonah, and he was sort of doing a campaign event, and Reed Scott, who plays Dan Egan, who wasn't even in the scene but was just there hanging out, just sort of pitched an idea, and we just changed the entire scene off of an actor not in the scene sort of throwing in an idea. And I'll take an idea from craft services. I'll take, best joke wins, best idea wins. Yeah. But so good stuff comes out of it that way. Yeah.
Well, Peter, the Breaking Bad universe deals with a lot of quote unquote real Americans. They're not like from the coast. They're not elite. And cultural division was
Everyone's a real American.
Well, the way.
Thank you.
Well, the cultural divide sort of came up a lot during the election, and are we missing like the pulse of Middle America? How much did like political talk come out? How much does it come up in the writers' room, if at all?
I know this is not the answer that anybody wants to hear, but the truth is we try not to talk about politics in the room, not in terms of the news. Mm-hmm. I don't know if it's ever been a specific effort, but I feel like as writers, we spend all our time, so much of our time, reading the paper or reading the news on the internet, our interest is really in human behavior. And in what the story, where the story takes us, and who these characters are, and weirdly enough, I think if there's politics in the show, or if there's politics, we kind of build it from the bottom up rather than coming from the top down. And our real interest is how do we experience things, what are our relationships like? It's not so much a broader canvas of the nation as a whole, or as the world as a whole. So if there's a journalistic side to the show, which I don't know that there is, but sometimes we learn things about the legal system that surprise us and interest us. For instance, the whole idea of the way public defender works, the way the courtroom is essentially an assembly line where everybody's getting paid except for the defendant. Those things fascinate us because that's not what we're used to seeing. But that's in terms of direct politics, what's going on today. The other thing is that the show takes place. It's a prequel to a show that started in whatever it was, 2008. So it's just sort of, I think the beautiful thing for us is if it can be sort of timeless in its own way. It's not really meant to be topical. And then I love things that are topical, and I love Veep, and I love all the shows that are out that are topical. I'm a great consumer of those things, but that's not really That's not really what we're doing. For whether for better or for worse, we're kind of we're playing our game with these characters and trying to understand them as best we can.
What part of the process you guys were in the writers' room during the election, and how it played into your room?
Our show is, we were done writing, we were shooting, and the same as you, we were shooting the day before, and we were in Canada, which was a little different, but our show is very political. I mean, it's about a big political change in the U.S., a takeover by a fundamentalist, theocratic totalitarian system.
So a documentary.
Yeah, documentary, exactly. Imagine, if you will. But it was, it's interesting because I think it affected everybody personally. We strangely, I think we do have a very happy-go-lucky set as well. It seems when you watch the show that it would be a misery, but it is, but it isn't. There's a lot of giggling. But I think it was a much more personal reaction than a change in. We were already doing something that was. We were already trying to be gutsy and straightforward and political, so it didn't really change that. I think it just made us more comfortable with that choice. But the day we were doing it, we did a scene where that has a quote from the book about better never means better for everyone. It always means worse for some. I mean, we were doing that scene that day, so that was creepy.
How about for you, Gloria? I mean, the Fidel Castro death, you guys had already wrapped, right?
We had wrapped by the time that happened. I mean, that's the one thing about being on Netflix that Norman's really not used to, because he, in his day, something would happen, he would comment on it the next week. So that's one thing we can't do. We can sort of be relevant while not being exactly topical. So we would have loved to do something about the election, but we couldn't. But we were able to. I mean, we're going to talk about Fidel's death, obviously, and unfortunately, issues with Latinos in this country haven't changed a lot in 20 years. So
exactly.
It's not going to be that
perennially
different.
relevant.
All the stuff that we can talk about are kind of the same.
Well, to that effect, I mean, you guys all have different release schedules. Some are week to week. Some are, is it 2 a week with?
They're putting out three today, actually. 3 the first day, and then 1 a week for. I was told there'd be no math, so I don't know.
And then it's some all at once. How do you think about how people will watch your show? How much does that come into play in the writer's room, thinking if they'll watch like 3 or 4 at a time, if they'll stock them up, or if they will piece it out?
I think about it a lot more this season than I did last season, because we premiered January 6th, and the evening of January 6th, people were tweeting us when season 2. So once you realize that there are some people that are consuming it that way, I mean, I can't help but think, well, how will this? I mean, we arc it that we do 13 episodes, which is a lovely number, and we do arc it and have some version of serialization in there to sort of keep people. We're telling a story about this family that has obviously individual episodes, but we are building to something every year, and it's going to hopefully pay off in some way. So we think about it a lot.
It's a big issue. I mean, it was my first question when Hulu greenlit the show, and we were going to do 10. Is it going to be 10 in one day? Is it going to be 10 over a week? And they said, we aren't really sure. And I was like, okay, you have to tell me, because it's a completely different kind of storytelling. But 10 episodes in a row is a big chunk, and the bingeable elements, it makes them really bingeable. You guys must think about it very carefully, the way they weave together.
It's hard, though, because you don't know how people are going to watch it. Some people are going to watch all 10, and some people are going to spread it out. So I don't think about it too much, but, like you said, we have a season arc, but, I mean, look, to me, each season is kind of a singular piece. So, like, if I read a review of the show where someone just watched, like, 4 episodes, I'm like, well, you didn't really watch the thing we made. Like, that's like watching 40% of a movie that was made. It's not really reviewing the entire arc of the season. But in season 2, it was, I know what you mean. Like, after the first season came out, kind of, you really realize how many people watch the whole thing so fast, and it's really frustrating because we spend a year. It takes a year to make a season of the show, and then it finishes like that's it. Where's the rest? And it's like, well, man, I don't know.
It's hard as a viewer too, because sometimes I will watch, like, especially if it's a comedy and I can just go through it.
Oh, yeah.
But then when the new season comes out, I'm like, I don't really remember.
But you watch it
all the-
again.
It's kind of like working on a bad movie where you work on it for 2 years, and then like on Friday morning, the marketing people just tell you, yeah, it's not opening, and you're done. And you're just like, it was like, but it's Friday, like the weekend isn't even over. It just came out this morning.
Yeah.
I know it's over. And it's just like,
it's the
whatever.
same disappointment, just in success.
I think one of the changes, though, is that the audience pays such close attention. It's not so much, for me anyway, it's not so much, are they watching it all at once, are they watching it in pieces, but it's that people are paying such close attention, and they have the ability to go back and refresh themselves on what happened, and that gives us the opportunity to be very subtle and to set something up at the beginning of a season and have it pay off at the end, or have details that develop as the season goes on, or characters who come back. We have characters who come back after a couple of seasons, and the fact, I think that some of this is just that people have access such quick access to the episodes, and it gives us the ability to not be too redundant with the information. I mean, I can imagine a world. I never worked in any other kind of television, really, but I can imagine where, when I was a kid, you would turn on the TV, and if you missed that episode Thursday night, then you'd have to hope that there was a rerun later. And so, of course, nobody wanted to do anything serialized, because you miss something. I missed that episode. I can't watch that show. Yeah. Now we have the ability to pepper things in, and also for us, I don't want to make it sound like we have a master plan and we can pepper things. It's also, we can look at the episodes that we've already written or broken or shot and say, wait a minute, what happened with that character?
We'd look really smart if we laid this in earlier.
Yes, there was a moment, and also, or there's a character. We had a local Albuquerque actor who played an assistant district attorney, and he had one line in the second episode, and we loved him, and Bob loved him, and so we brought him back once, and then we brought him back again, and then we brought him back again, and it's each time we learned more about that character, and we learned more about what that actor Peter DeSeth was able to do with that character, and he just adds this wonderful little note. But if we had to reintroduce who he was each time he came on, it would just slow the story down to a grinding halt, and we wouldn't be able to do that.
So it's kind of like clarity. Clarity becomes much less of a chore.
Yes.
Because
I completely agree with, and I love doing all of those things. I guess I never credited it to any of the notion of like the streaming or any of that stuff. To me, it just was part of like, as television sort of started moving in a better direction, which was just sort of like basically going, they're not idiots. We don't have to every time explain things, and they'll figure it out or they'll catch up, which I think there was a definite sort of moment when TV made some of those decisions, both in drama and comedy. But it's interesting that you're connecting it to that. I was just sort of, yeah.
Well, how does it influence pacing? Like knowing how to pace your show out. How much is too much too soon?
Well, I'm still learning that on my show. And it's the book. It's from a book by Margaret Atwood. It's very intense stuff, and I'm really curious about. I think I'd need a week between episodes. So I'm very curious to see.
I think you just have to feel it out. I don't think there's an easy answer. I know when I sat down, when I was, I guess, taking the job, if you will, or they were, I guess, sort of, I sort of sat down with HBO and with Julia, and at that point they had sort of told me that Armando had left it with this tie, this basically election night tie. This is going back 2 years, which meant that it was the vote would go based on the Constitution, the vote would be in the House of Representatives as sort of this thing. And I was like, oh, that's fascinating. And as I started to sort of think about it and read it, I watched the episodes, read the scripts that they had at that point, and kind of came back to them. I came back to them sort of, and this is, like I said, 2 years ago, so nothing to do with Trump, nothing to do with Hillary, sort of this plan of, okay, I think what's going to happen, I'm interested in this, and this is what I'm thinking, which is we will resolve that episode. I think maybe there's a chance to do sort of our take maybe on like a Florida sort of recount situation, and ultimately it will go to the House of Representatives, and these things will happen, and she will lose. That to me is the most important thing, is she will lose. She will not be President of the United States, and I think the worst thing in the world that could happen to her is she will lose to another woman, and we will figure out how to make that happen, because that is her worst nightmare. It is she wants to be president more than itself, but more than that, the idea of another woman sort of eating her lunch would drive her crazy. And then the show will transition into being a show about the former president of the United States. That was sort of the plan. But I definitely said to them, I don't know if this is one season and maybe 6 episodes in she's no longer president and then we're here, or it's a season and I'll start getting into it. But sort of big overall arcs, and then starting to think about like what do we need and what can we find and whatever. And one of the big things there was the idea of making Jonah a congressman so that one of our actual people would have skin in the game of the actual election and could actually then influence the vote that would affect her one way or another. And then all of a sudden it's like, okay, this is a season unto itself. So we're sort of just playing out this sort of larger plan, but you're constantly sort of feeling it out.
Did that change when you got into the room or in that conversation with them?
No, that was sort of what I guess came at them. I'm a very big believer in big arcs. I like, when I start a season, I like to go into the season knowing, in some ways it sounds a little weird, like I like knowing what the first scene is, and I kind of like having an idea of what the last scene of the season might be, and then ultimately just sort of building
and
that bridge.
Comfortable that there's going to be a bridge between.
Yeah, I mean, I don't always know how it will, the bridge, but I just knowing that that's the journey is very important to me.
Does it stay the same? Does that last scene stay the same?
The last scene has stayed the same. It changed locations on this current scene, but the gist of it is the same. Last season was very much like the whole to-do. Yeah.
So when you come in at the beginning of a new season, guys, do you bring in, I mean, I always have an idea in my head of what we're going to do, but the minute I say it, they're all so polite and respectful that no one says, we're not going to do that. So I tend to hold onto it and let them, work through ideas and stuff, because either they'll end up where I was, but they'll have gotten there through their own process and stress tested it themselves and be much more invested in it, or they'll come up with something else and I won't have to look dumb by saying, oh, don't do what I. But do you guys go in, I mean, this is your second season, did you go in with ideas, or did you have ideas and let them
Yes, we came in with this is the first episode, this is the last episode. These are the last 2 episodes. And then we'll kind of see what journey they take to get there, but that's where we're ending. And then we would hear from them. And we had a bunch of ideas too, that it's funny, there were a couple of things where we swore we would do them and we didn't.
Oh yeah, that's always great.
That always happens because somebody else also brings in great stuff, personal stuff from their own life, and we talk about that.
You're in a unique position because has the writer's room opened up already?
Yeah.
And so what is the mood like right now, considering a possible strike is in the air?
We're just keeping our head down and working until they tell us we can't.
Yeah.
Because, we love it. So we're going to keep on going until
our room started yesterday, and so it's the same thing.
What's the mood like? Like, what are people talking about? Does it feel like
they're talking about the show? I mean, no one even mentioned. I mean, there's nothing we can do about it. I mean, really. I mean, everybody has their one vote, but I mean, I think it doesn't change what you're doing in terms of figuring out the story. We go as quickly as we can anyway, and you don't want to go too quickly because then you just do crappy stuff, even though it's faster. So it doesn't change anything.
What do you guys remember about the 2008 one?
I have a T-shirt.
You have a T-shirt.
I was pregnant, so I was walking. I remember walking pregnant and meeting a lot of great people. I met a lot of great writers.
Yeah, and actors used to bring us.
Yeah,
the casts of shows used to bring us shows.
I loved it.
Yeah.
It was a very weird thing, which was our daughter had just been born and we had just moved into a new house.
What were you writing on then?
I guess I don't even know. I mean, it was sort of like not anything specific. I was sort of like in between Curb seasons and working on movie stuff. So it wasn't like I had a regular job that shut. I guess ostensibly at that point we were still being a little more regular with Curb, where it was kind of like what you're doing, like one season every 2 years or so. Yeah, exactly. So we'd sort of do it, take a little time off and do it. So ostensibly I was working on Curb, and actually I ended up using like the Curb production designer and a lot of Curb crew that helped me like furnish my house really quickly because the baby was born and that. So that was nice, but obviously, this time I am hoping by the time this airs, we are all working and then there is a deal. I voted yes, but boy, I just really don't want there to be a strike. So,
Peter?
It's the same one. Don't want to strike. If we have to strike, that's what we're going to do. And it ultimately, just from my point of view, it's not really up to us. It's up to the companies to do what's right. So that's really I don't know. There's not a lot more to say than that. My strike memory is actually of having to leave Albuquerque. Because my Breaking Bad's first season was cut short by the strike, and so I actually my episode was in prep. It was in prep, and
you're still working with those characters.
And I had
and
that's
another
right.
possible strikes coming around.
10 years,
amazing.
10 years later, and I was on the picket line, and people would say, "So what show are you on?" I'm like, "This thing called Breaking Bad. They're shooting my episode right now." And I've been holding a picket sign. That's what I was trying to mime there. So there was. But I also remember being on picket line and being very entertained by Dana Gould, who's not a relation, but one of the funniest people around. And I got Dana kept a whole group of us on Lancashire entertained for days on end. And so all I can say is I hope if it comes to that again, that I'm stationed wherever he is, because he's a lot of fun.
I do remember where I was marching outside of Universal. I hadn't watched Battlestar Galactica, the new series, and and it turned out the people who were on Battlestar were walking. So what I would do is I'd go home at night and watch one episode, and then I'd find the writer, and you'd get like DVD commentary all day long. And there's nothing, every writer, if you walk up to them on a picket line and say, "Hey, could we talk about your episode for 4 hours?" They were in heaven, and it was great. I mean, so every day I would just watch an episode and find out who wrote it, and it was so much fun for me because you get to ask them a million questions, and it made the time go by. So.
How about, do you have any memories from
that? I think I was doing that sketch show Human Giant at that time. I was a little
Human
kid
Giant.
then. Oh, thanks.
Love it. We watch. I was telling you before. We watch Human Giant sketches all the time in the writers' room.
How much time? So I feel like in our writers' room, and I remember when I would visit the Parks and Rec writers' room, it was just a matter of like, how long till we just start wasting time on the internet and go watch the dumbest stuff on YouTube?
Well, do you have the difference is I think when I was on ER, John Wells was also running West Wing and probably 9 other shows. And so, we had writers meetings 3 days a week between, 2 and 5. And most of the shows I've ever been, when I'm running the show, it's like basically all the time. It just, but so do you guys all have kind of, basically the room is the office and where everybody sits, or is it specific times that you guys have laid down for, because you've got a lot of other things to do?
Well, when we're writing, we're just writing. We do all our writing before we start shooting, so we're just there from 10 to 5, 6, whatever, and we're just in the room just chatting and figuring out stuff. And if we're writing a script, I'll go off and write it, or Alan will go off and write, and then maybe we'll kind of break up into groups depending on tasks that need to be done. But yeah, I mean, when we're writing, we're kind of just writing. Towards the end, it starts getting into like pre-production, but generally it's, the writing's separated. Right. That's why it takes so long, because there's no overlap. On Parks and Rec, it's like the writing is happening simultaneously. Master of None, it's all, there's
you're
no
splitting
overlap.
out the tasks,
Yeah, so it takes a lot longer.
Yeah, we like to break it all, and then like break 8 so that everyone has something to write, and then we all take a week off to write, so that everyone stays in the room. We like to be together, but it's like 10 to 5. We have good hours too. I know that's a rarity.
Yeah,
oh my God! When I hear about the bad hour shows, I'm like, what's going on? Jeez, I don't know how this is making anything better.
Without naming names, or with naming
the
names.
latest 2 a.m. was common, and 5 a.m. was the latest I've seen, like 5:02.
There's no way this stuff's getting better.
In the writers' room. Yep. So you guys are talking about a story till 5 in the morning?
Yep.
it seems like you can't possibly coming up with your best stuff at
you're
3.
Bring a
not.
game,
You're
yeah.
not.
That's a lot of people like trying to escape their homes. That's,
But that.
I run this show and I hate my family. We're staying till 5.
Yeah, that's exactly right.
What
I
could
mean-
our show be?
Our show?
Yes. If we all write together, what would that look like?
That'd be one weird ass show. I'd watch it.
I'd watch it.
I would just come up with 1 or 2 characters and just send everybody off to write a script. I think that'd probably be the best way, and that'd probably get us the best show.
And we could eat ice cream?
Hey, I
Maybe.
do like ice cream.
Do you guys ever have 2 rooms going?
Rarely.
Yeah, sometimes it's
Rarely.
it's like, hey, can you guys work on this thing and try to walk around, figure out this thing. You guys figure out, what happens in this story.
Definitely have people thinking about stuff. The hardest thing for me is I'm on the set for everything.
Wow.
I don't leave.
Do you
the
guys
set.
overlap the writing and shooting?
Some, a
Yeah.
little bit. I mean, what when we get together and we start, which is usually the beginning of the summer or some point in the summer, we spend a lot of the summer just talking about ideas and then ultimately putting them into sort of piles, similar piles, and then those piles, like writers go off to turn those into outlines and then hopefully eventually into scripts. But invariably, the scripts aren't fully done. They just never are, no matter how much time you have. And obviously things change and things develop. And so once we're actually shooting, like I said, I'm on the stage or the location for the whole thing. And so definitely then I have especially if they'll be like, I'll try and read stuff and give notes and whatever, but then they'll be like my number 2 will run a sort of a punch-up room, whatever, that I'm not there for, and things of that nature. But that's when it gets harder, is when we're actually shooting, and it just always does. And no matter how much you
Yeah.
tell yourself we're going to have all 10 scripts done, they are never.
There's
done.
always writing
Yeah.
to be done.
And
That's
also-
why we.
Yeah.
Oh, sorry, go ahead.
Oh, I was just going to say that I've been on shows where they have all the scripts done ahead of time, and as you were saying, you end up. It doesn't work. I mean, it does, but it's not the effective use of the process, because the whole point of it is that you can see and change things as they go along and see how things are. So if you have them all ahead of time and just say, okay, we're just going to shoot that no matter what, we're going to put our head down and shoot that, you don't take advantage of the fact that you are doing individual chapters and you get to revise and go back. I mean, I fuss with scripts all the way up till the last minute. We have, last season we had most of our scripts done, but we still mess around with them for a long time.
Well, thank you guys so much for joining us, and thanks for all the hours of TV. It was a pleasure.
Thank you.
Yeah, so much.